Alrighty, Bowhunters, welcome back to another episode. I'm sitting here online with Dr. James Park. James, thank you very much for joining me, mate. It's really a great pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Matty.
A little bit of backstory in regards to how we got to this interview. Essentially, a lot of bow hunting is talking about arrow weights, figuring out, like, so many people geek out on it. You have to have heavy FOC. You have to have a heavy arrow. No, you need to have a light arrow for speed. You need to have the fastest arrow possible so it gets to the animal without it being able to react. And then there's the opposite of, no, you need to be able to blow an arrow through an animal to make sure that you get the result where you want 2 holes. So there's so many conflicting bits of advice out there. And recently I interviewed a guy, Ranch Fairy, and I had some people say, hey, would you ever interview someone who talks about it from the other side of the play in regards to fast arrows or arrow accuracy and things like this? And I don't think Troy is saying anything that's not about arrow accuracy, because he really is, but he really is geared towards the heavier arrow. Something that I said to you, James, before we started is I've found a setup that works for me and I just keep to it because I haven't had it fault on me. So why would I change? And I think everyone eventually gets to that stage. But at the same time, I'm very interested in arrow science and talking a lot about what that actually is, which is your whole doctorate that was around arrow flight, arrow science. And I believe that you've definitely done a lot for the Olympic side of archery and target archery and figuring out the best protocols for an arrow flight, for making sure that you're as accurate as possible. And so I thought it'd be a perfect situation to bring you in and talk all things arrow flight, arrow physics, and then dive into the crossovers of what archery brings to bow hunting as well.
Sure.
So give us a background, James. Where did you start? How did you get into archery? How did you get into doing a doctorate in arrows?
Yeah, I started archery in 1960, Matty. I've always been a target archer. Now, I guess that aside from the target range, there's also the field course. And I have shot a good bit of field archery. I haven't been a hunter. Simply target range takes my time. I'm an engineer. I've always been interested in the science sitting behind our sport, and always worked on the basis that if I can understand the science and put things into the maths, then perhaps I can optimize it.
Oh, 100%.
So I've studied these things for many years. I guess the prominent one is back in 2008, I decided to turn some of this into studies at Monash University.
Yeah.
I did that to do a PhD. Now, 2 reasons for that. One, I wanted the academic rigor that comes with doing such a thing.
Definitely.
Because everything then is reviewed, and so you have to do it properly. Also, the university has had some nice toys that I don't have.
Like what?
Wind tunnels and things like that.
Yeah, okay.
So my PhD, I looked at overall what I was doing is optimizing the accuracy of a compound bow. A big part of that was arrow behavior, both during the power stroke of the bow and then what does the arrow do downrange. So I was looking at things like how the arrow flexes, how it rotates, particularly what happens in wind. Because you think the game that I play in the target range, the thing that is most damaging is wind drift.
Yes.
And so how do we minimise the wind drift so that we can score the most?
Creates a lot of variables.
Then from the point of view of, say, field archery, we haven't got as much wind. We might have some, depending on courses, of course, but you also don't necessarily know the distance. And you're shooting up and down hills, so maybe a bit of effort to reduce the sight gap is a useful thing. So that's the sort of domains I've played in.
Yeah.
I've published a lot in those areas. I've also published a lot on the sorts of errors we bake in our shooting. If we can describe them, from my point of view, if I can describe them in the maths and physics, I can then say, how can we optimize them so that the archers don't make those errors and score more?
Are you talking about actual form errors?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And so I guess maybe to kick this off, maybe we should start with talking about the physics and the maths that we're actually calculating. What are we actually measuring? What do those things mean when it comes to when it translates to a graph and then when it translates to real life situations?
I guess we're thinking arrows. How much energy of the bow? How does the arrow keep that energy downrange?
Is that all kinetic energy, or is that kinetic energy and then momentum?
I think the thing that we talk about is kinetic energy. Like when you draw your bow, you store a whole heap of potential energy. Then when you release, you capture a good proportion of that potential energy into kinetic energy in the arrow.
Yep.
Now you do lose some energy along the way because, for example, when the arrow comes off, the string's still moving.
I love watching slow motion videos of a bow, a compound bow. It's so incredible to watch how much flex you get in that string.
Yes.
Yeah.
that bit of energy never gets to the arrow. Hopefully you get most of the energy. And that depends, of course, on how heavy the arrow is. A heavy arrow, you're going to get more of that energy. Then how does the arrow then keep that energy downrange? Now, a lot of that depends on the aerodynamic drag.
So that's fletchings, etc. Fletchings, thickness of the shaft.
Fletching is certainly a big part of it. And one of the things I've done is to very carefully model that aerodynamic drag of the, you get the point, I guess the hunter's point of view, the broadhead,
Yep.
and the shaft, the fletches and the knock. Actually, the biggest contributor is actually the shaft.
Yeah, wow. What, the thickness of the shaft in general?
Surface area of the shaft is actually the biggest contributor.
Surface area mean if it's a cross-woven carbon versus if it's a flat.
Basically the diameter.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, wow.
So the shaft itself is the biggest contributor. Target arrow it's about 3/4 of the drag from the shaft.
It's very funny. I interviewed a few different people, and one of the guys I interviewed, his name is past me right now, Tim. Anyway, he was shooting for Matthews at the time. He went to a target archery contest, and he actually got stabilizers. He got the poles of stabilizers and used them. And use them for his arrows, because he's, heck, if we can get away with fat arrows for shooting target archery and we can score a 10 by having half on the 10 and half on the 8, then heck, why not go for that? So he went in as a joke, and no one actually questioned him on it at all. But yeah, that was hilarious.
They've since changed the rules so he can't do it. But
yes, yeah.
He was indoors, of course.
Yes.
I think he was at Vegas doing that.
Correct, yeah, I think so.
But outdoors, it would kill you.
Yes, of course, because of the wind and whatever else.
The wind would kill you.
Yeah.
Because the shaft is the biggest contributor. So for a target arrow, it's about 3/4. After that, it's the fletch.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there's two components of the fletch drag. There's the surface area of the fletch. There's also the profile of the fletch. So it's the frontal area. And they both matter.
Yeah, no, I recently interviewed some boys who did some sound testing, and they were talking about the same concept in regards to the shape and the height and the thickness of the fletches and how much that affects the sound, which obviously in hunting might be a lot more of an issue than it is in target archery.
Not for target archery.
No, exactly. You don't need to worry about making noise 30 meters out on the shot, but in hunting, it becomes a big difference.
Yeah. But what you want to do, I guess for both games, is you want to minimize the drag. Because you start off with the arrow out of the bow with a certain amount of energy, hopefully most of it.
Yep.
Then you don't want to lose much of that energy downrange. And so what you're trying to do then is minimize the drag. And so then when the arrow gets to where it's going, you've got the most energy to do something with.
So in regards to target archery and the whole concept of what you've used as, I guess, a hypothesis, is it essentially the faster the arrow, the less of a change is going to be where you're aiming from? So no.
Target archery, we're using a sight, so we just set the sight for the distance, and the sight gap doesn't matter at all. It can certainly matter in field archery, of course, but not target archery.
Yep.
So what we're trying to do target archery is basically minimize the drift.
Okay. So that's the side-to-side movement of the arrow.
Yeah, that's right. How much the wind blows us around. It blows the archer around as well, but there's also going to blow the arrow around in free flight. So we're trying to minimize the drag.
Yes. Okay. So drag will affect the drift, is what you're saying as well.
Yes. Yeah. The drag directly creates the drift. So
okay.
To minimize the drag, we've got the least wind drift, and then we don't have to allow for the wind so much or we can allow for the wind more effectively.
So it's not necessarily a slower or a faster arrow will get more affected by the wind drift. It's like it literally comes, or that is a part of it.
It's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
And one I've looked at really, very carefully. And what you find is that to minimize the drag, to minimize the wind drift, the things that matter most, the diameter, the shaft, and the mass of the arrow.
So total mass, including all components.
Correct. Now, So what it says is that the most important is the diameter.
Okay.
So what it says is to use a small diameter. The smallest diameter is going to be the best.
Which is super interesting to me, because a lot of target archers in particular go for a fatter shaft.
Not the wise ones.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. It's just from what I've seen in target archery, not that I've watched heaps of it, but essentially.
Indoors, of course, doesn't matter. You use the thickest you can because you want to touch the lines.
Exactly.
The thinnest you can use. X10 is the thinnest you can use.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, the other thing that matters is the mass. You want lots of mass.
Mass, then does mass matter in regards to where it is? Mass up front, mass up back, mass across the whole arrow?
From the point of view of the drift, it's just the mass of the arrow.
So it wouldn't change if you had heavy FOC.
Matters where it is.
Okay, yeah.
from the drift. It's just how massive. Now, in comparing arrows, a useful parameter you can use is to take the diameter and divide by the square root of the mass. So the best indicator if you're comparing arrows is diameter divided by the square root of the mass.
So what does that calculate to?
That's like you go through them. You're calculating the wind drift is actually quite complicated, but if you break it down to the simplest terms, the diameter by the square root of the mass is the best way to compare them.
Okay.
So the drift is broadly proportional to the diameter divided by the square root of the mass.
Okay. So essentially, like you've got each different arrow is going to have its own components in regards to the per inch. I can't remember what it's called. GPI, is it?
Per inch.
Yeah, grains per inch.
Yeah.
Essentially, what you're saying is a thinner arrow with a heavier grain per inch is going to be your ideal setup.
Correct. That's going to be your best. That's going to keep the most energy downrange. It's going to drift the least. Now, interestingly, as you make arrows bigger, to get the same spine, the wall thickness becomes thinner.
Yeah.
So usually what you'll find is that for the same spine of the same material, a smaller diameter arrow will have higher grains per inch.
Okay.
So what we're looking for in particularly a target arrow is a small diameter, high mass.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, for example, that's where an X10 for target is marvelous because it's very skinny and it's very heavy.
What is the X10 arrow? Who's it made by? What
Easton.
Easton's. Yeah. Okay.
Now another beauty is that that range of arrows has got an aluminium core inside. The aluminium is quite heavy.
So increasing your mass even more then.
Increasing the mass. That's right. So again, the drift is less, or the amount of energy they keep down range is higher.
Okay. So taking into effect wind in general, obviously for a hunting situation, the crossovers of this would mean the same concept, right? Like a thinner shaft with a heavier set arrow. Now, when we talk about a heavy set arrow, what sort of weights are you talking to? And obviously it's going to vary.
Target nut, we're up to about 400 grains.
Yeah, wow. It's so light.
So to you guys, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us, 400 is quite a heavy arrow.
Okay, so what if you were to push that up and you were to go to the 500 range? What do you see happens in the testings that you guys did?
Well, what it will do, it will reduce the wind drift, but it will also give us challenges getting sights on the target at the longest distances.
So what's the longest distances you're shooting?
Normal competition, the longest we ever shoot is 90 metres.
Yeah, wow.
Typically, it's a bit shorter than that, 50, 70 metres.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's hunting up maybe the same distance as the field course. Our field course is 10 to 60 metres.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of what I've been educated on from just good hunters in Australia is essentially the closer the better. So anything under 20 meters is going to be an ideal shot because you've got less room for error. You're not going to have the animal move as much, especially if it's unaware. So it's really 20 meters and under is like the ideal position to be able to get yourself into.
Absolutely.
And yeah, when it comes to, and this I think also plays into the whole concept of lighter arrow versus a heavier arrow. It depends on where you're shooting from, because if you're taking those longer shots, those longer bombs, like you're saying, if you're taking a 90-meter shot, you need to make sure that arrow is not so heavy because that sight housing only has room for so much.
Keep your sight on the target.
No, exactly. You'll be used to bubble or off of the target.
What I do suggest to the target archers is use the heaviest arrow that still lets you get your sight on at the longest distance.
Yeah, okay. So you'd say 90 meters at the absolute bottom that you can, and just,
Correct.
Now,
then for a field archer, field course, say with this maximum distance 60 metres, much shorter, although still long for your go, as well as haven't got as much wind, so it's less important. Still important, but less important, but the sight gap becomes important. My advice there would be use a skinny arrow, but go for lighter so you're a bit faster.
Got you. Okay, so you're going lighter rather than heavier in that concept.
Just lighter so that you get a smaller sight gap.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
But a big important consideration, I think, for both of our games is, I mentioned that when you pull the bow back, you store a certain amount of energy. It depends on the forced draw curve, how strong the bow is and how long the draw is and all that sort of stuff, what the cam looks like.
Yep.
But you don't get all of that energy into the arrow. You lose a proportion of it in the, for example, the string retains some energy after the arrow leaves it. But you get more of that energy if the arrow's heavier.
Yeah, okay. So
it's a good reason to go to a heavy arrow.
Definitely. So where are you measuring kinetic energy from? I got told it was only getting measured from the bow shot only. Like from when it releases the bow, that's literally where you measure kinetic energy from.
Well,
What?
the initial of kinetic energy, it also matters when it gets to the other end, of course. For
Okay.
your game, but the kinetic energy at the target doesn't matter so much for my game.
No.
I
Yes.
think for your game it does.
I would agree. It's target archery is getting it to the target versus bow hunting is getting it
Yeah.
through, ideally.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We'd rather it didn't stick in. We don't want it to go through.
You don't want to have to spend all day pulling it out.
That's right. But the difference is just how much it loses to drag. Like I say, the distances you're shooting, you say get down to very close, you're not going to lose a lot.
Okay. So in regards to the studies and research that you've done, are you ever measuring at the target the kinetic energy?
Yes.
And so what are you seeing in regards to this ideal setup that you've talked about with a thin diameter, heavy shaft, 400 grains? How much?
Much more energy if you've got a small diameter heavy arrow.
Okay. And how much is it losing from the shot takeoff at the bow versus when it hits the actual target?
Depends greatly on the arrow.
Of course. Yeah.
And of course on the distance, but you lose quite a bit. Well, if you think of the drag on an arrow, I'm thinking to target arrow, again, from your point of view, it's quite a light arrow. The drag on the arrow is equivalent to stopping at 1G in your car.
Okay.
That's heavy braking in a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much an arrow is slowing down. It's a lot.
Yeah. Far out.
A big diameter, large arrow could be 2Gs. So it's vicious.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy.
A big diameter light arrow loses a lot of energy quite quick.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I wouldn't have thought that it would be that big of a difference to be almost double. That's insane.
It's substantial.
Yeah.
So if I was trying to, without being a hunter, trying to figure an arrow that would matter, I'd be going for heavy and small diameter.
Yeah.
Now, I assume that you're wanting penetration.
Correct.
Going through something, the small diameter is also going to help you.
What about, it wouldn't it matter more so about the broadhead on the front?
Yeah, sure, but there'll still be a fair bit of drag from the shaft as well.
Yeah, okay.
That's talking as a not hunter.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it is an interesting fact. But then once again, like what would dictate, what would be a heavy arrow in that concept of what you're saying? Like how much more there's obviously 1,000 tests that you could do to have to figure this all out, but let's play that out then. Okay. So what test would you run if you were testing for best penetration, most accurate shot process, shot arrow weight that you could do?
Energy at the target, I would take. Measure the energy at the target.
Yeah. So the heavier the energy is at the target, the better it's going to be.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So then I'd be trying to extract the most I could from the bow. So heavy arrow, and at least drag.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So is momentum something that comes into your equations ever?
Not particularly.
Not particularly. Yeah. Okay.
No.
And so in regards to the actual vane sizes that you've played with.
Very important.
Yeah. Let's talk to that.
Let's talk that. What a good topic. What the vanes are trying to do two things. They're trying to get the arrow flying straight and they're trying to spin the arrow.
Yeah.
Now, I've done lots of analysis and measurements of both of those.
Yeah.
First, perhaps you cover the spinning the arrow. Done direct measurements of accuracy for arrows that spin or don't spin. You definitely want to spin them.
Okay, just because it helps to straighten it up and keep it on course.
And what it does, even though the arrows can be very good in their tolerances, even at the best tolerances, if you spin them, they're more accurate. Now, the way I've tested that is grid tested arrows with fletches straight or angled and angled at various amounts to get them to spin different amounts directed to the grip size of the target.
And so what did you find in regards to all of this?
You must spin them.
Yeah.
So then the question is how much you should spin them.
Exactly, because drag then becomes a factor as well, doesn't it?
Not so much, in fact.
Oh, really? I would have thought a bigger helical would spin more and therefore would affect the flow.
It's an interesting one, that one, but like how much we should spin them. And what I've generally said is that if we take the shortest distance that we shoot, say for my game, that would be 10-meter field target.
Yep.
You want to spin the arrow a couple of times in that distance. You don't need to spin it more than a couple of times in that distance.
Yep.
And so for a typical target arrow, you remember we're talking arrows here that are probably 5 or 6 millimeter diameter. We want a vane angle of about 1 to 1.5 degrees.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yep.
Now,
It's really not that much.
It's not a huge amount.
No.
But if you don't spin them, the grips are definitely worse, even for nominally very high precision arrows.
So you're getting inconsistencies because of the bending of the arrow at the start, essentially?
Just the manufacturing tolerances of the arrow, I think.
Okay.
That I think that ultimately, even if you take the very best arrows, which I've done, and grip test them with and without vane angle, you want the vane angle.
Yeah, wow.
The question, the comment you always get is that you're putting a vane angle on, that you've got increased drag, if you lose energy. It's actually not so much the case. Of course, you've got to get the arrow spinning a little bit. And the spinning of the arrow, it's taking some energy to have it spinning. And that energy's got to come from somewhere, and that comes from the arrow speed.
Yeah.
So a typical target arrow, if you put a vane angle of, say, 2 degrees, you're going to lose about 2 feet per second. So yes, it costs you, but it's cost you hardly anything. And once the arrow is spinning, of course, the vanes are then edge on to the effective air. Once it's spinning at the angle that the vanes dictate, the vanes are edge on. So then you haven't got increased drag from that.
Interesting. But then before you were saying that speed is not necessarily something that you are is not as important as accuracy, right?
No, it's accuracy. We're after finest little grips we can get.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So what I would be doing would be definitely putting some angle. You don't need to overdo it. If you say that say target arrow 1 to 2 degrees, plenty. And typically we would use a straight vane, not helical, just from the point of view of clearance. Now,
okay.
if you take a broadhead, absolutely you want to spin. Exact same reasons, but you don't. So you definitely want some vane angle, but you don't need a huge angle. Perhaps it takes a bit more than a target arrow because you've got the broadhead where the blades will be not angled, they'll be straight.
Yeah.
So they'll be counteracting any spin you get from the vanes.
Interesting.
You probably need a bit more vane angle to deal with that. But
yes. Yeah, there's actually an interesting little part that it was Robbie Austin, he owns a broadhead company, and he was saying that he was shooting a 3-blade broadhead with a 4 vane setup. Yeah. And he would find the inefficiencies of the spin. Like essentially it was not as accurate as what you would have thought it should be, versus when he went 3 and 3, it was much more accurate with the spin. I thought that was pretty interesting, just how much the change of the front and the back could make to the arrow. Yeah.
Like ultimately the vanes there's 2 aspects to the vane. There's the drag, which is you're slowing the arrow down and in our case, causing wind drift. But the other aspects that the vane is there for is it's from aerodynamic lift.
So it keeps it higher for longer.
So the lift is what helps the arrows stay going straight.
Okay.
It's lift from the fletchers that line the arrow up with the airflow, and it's the lift that gets the arrow spinning.
Okay.
And ultimately the amount of lift is just the vane area, surface area. So what it says then is if you want the thing to line up better or faster, more vane area.
Interesting.
But you don't want to overdo it because it's drag.
And then what about shapes of the vanes?
I think the shape's really important. So from a point of view of the lift, which is getting the arrow flying straight, it's just the area. But from a point of view of the drag, there are 2 components. There's the surface area and there's the frontal area.
So the thickness of the very front of the vane.
Thickness and the height.
Yeah, okay.
Now, it's an interesting one there. During my studies, I was calculating all these things in some detail. And of course, the surface area, that's easy enough to calculate. So I thought, just for the heck of it, I'll do the calculations for the frontal area. And I was a bit surprised by the result. I have to say that my initial thought was that it wouldn't be very high, but when you actually do the calculation, the frontal area matters from the point of view of the drag. It's quite important.
Okay, so what, more of or less of?
It's less than the effect of the drag from the frontal area is less than the surface area, but it's significant.
Sorry, no, I'm saying, are you asking for more frontal area or less frontal?
No, you're asking for less.
Less, yeah, okay.
So what that's saying is that a low profile vane is going to be better than a high profile.
Interesting.
So if we take a long low vane, it's going to be better than a short high vane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting.
So some of the vanes I see on, I guess they're hunting arrows, I don't like at all because they're very short and high.
Yeah.
There's an aerodynamicist. That's breaking the rules.
Definitely. Something that I know a lot of hunters have gone to, it's not necessarily all, but it's called the easy vanes that people are using right now because it's essentially pre-worked out diameter that you slip onto.
Yes.
And so it's all your vanes are attached to this sleeve and you essentially just slip the whole thing on, glue it in place and you're good to go. It's actually what I use.
Yep.
But it's already got your basic helical in it. It's got I use the longer vanes with a short, it's like not a high lift. It's just a long feather type, I guess was what you'd call it, like a gradual arc and gradual end. And I go for the 4 vane because it seems to tighten it up faster, in the sense of when you're shooting, if I had to shoot through a bush, something close by, I'd want to make sure that it's not going to be flopping all over the place and hitting a tree or something like that on the way through.
Yeah.
And definitely from what others have told me and what I've found myself is that the 4 vane helps to straighten it out faster. Is there anything that you've done with that proves any of that?
First I'd say that slip-on arrangement, I'm quite comfortable with. It's not something we would use target archery.
No, yes.
I'm quite comfortable with that sort of arrangement if it's done well. 3 vanes or 4 vanes, the physics just says surface area.
Got you. So the more surface area, the better.
I suppose hunting arrow with big broad end on the front, you want a fair bit of surface area on the vane. The 4 is going to give you the appropriate surface area, that's fine.
Yep.
The cost is the frontal area drag, that's all.
Yeah, of course. I didn't consider that just now.
But again, the distances you're shooting aren't so great, so it's not going to kill you so much. It would kill you at target archery.
So let's say you were to start shooting out to 50, 60, 70, anything up to 80 meters.
3 vanes.
Okay, interesting. So the effect that it will have, what will the difference be of that frontal?
The arrow will just lose more energy.
More energy. Okay. So essentially we're just trying to keep the energy up high by keeping the frontal surface area low.
What you're ultimately wanting to do is enough vane area to get the arrow to behave well, but not overdo the vane area or the number of vanes, because it increases the drag.
Yeah. So at what point do you actually take this all into consideration, being that if you're practicing at 60, 70, 80 meters and you're shooting with your 4 vane setup and it's doing the job, you're getting the penetration, you're getting everything that you essentially want, what would be the deciding factor for you to go, okay, no, we should get the 4 vane, scrap the 4 vane and go to a 3 vane?
But the long distance, it'll close your sight gap.
Okay, got you. So a bit more forgivingness in the sense of, if you mistake the distance or something like that.
The arrow's not going to be so great.
Interesting. So what are you finding in regards to arrow weights then, and that forgivingness? The difference of 50 grains on the sight housing gap, what is that going to do?
So if distance in the sight gap, you mean?
Yeah, correct.
Target range doesn't matter. Field course, it matters because we don't always know the distance, and the up and down hills mean the sight setting's got to be different, and we've got to make allowances. A faster arrow means that any errors we make are not so great.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's one of the guys in Summers that I've interviewed a lot. He does a lot of bow tuning, and he talks about this a lot, the forgivingness of an arrow, and essentially that not going super heavy. If you go super heavy, essentially your sight gap does have to increase. And therefore, if you mismeasure at 40 meters or 45 meters, the difference, exactly, the difference could be huge in the sense of what it means.
Yeah. I mostly shoot compound, but I shoot a bit of field. I've shot a few world field championships. Occasionally when I shoot recurve.
Yep.
Now, normally for recurve, if you're in the wind, you definitely would use the skinniest, heaviest arrow. So from that, you'd use an Eastern X10 always. But they're quite heavy. And the recurve, the sight gap's quite large.
Yep.
And so you go at the field course with the recurve, I use a lighter area. I use ACE, it's much lighter. And the sight gap's much closer. And so again, those errors are much reduced.
Yeah, got you. So essentially you're looking for the forgivingness because of the sport, rather.
Correct.
Yeah, it is all very interesting.
So there's a fair bit of similarity between our games in some respect, isn't there?
There is, and obviously accuracy is going to be the biggest factor.
Yeah.
But then the after effect is what we really want to think of. I guess that's the difference, is the after effect and the penetration of what you were saying before. What have you found compared to your traditional bows versus the compound bow? How much does it change once you're putting that extra energy into a bow? Like the ability of a 80-pound bow, for instance, on a compound versus, let's say, a 60-pound traditional bow. There's obviously going to be a lot of variance in the actual, you're talking about potential energy before, but the energy that these bows are able to project into the arrow then.
Basically like the bow type or draw weight is basically stored energy. And it's basically just how much of that you can get into the arrow. And so the physics is the same for both of them.
Yeah, interesting. So in regards to new technologies that are coming out, the upgrades of bows every single year, is this changing anything that we know about arrows or arrow flight or setup for arrows for the different bows that you're shooting, essentially?
Yeah, it does, because I think what it means is we're getting a bit more of the energy from the bow, the stored energy into the arrow.
Got you. So they're essentially improving the ability to store the energy in the arrow.
So if I think recurve bow, I think that's the case because the limbs are getting better. If I think compound, they're getting a bit cleverer with what they do with the cams.
Yep.
And so they're storing a bit more energy.
Storing more energy in the arrow on release. And what actually dictates how much gets into the arrow?
There's, think they have a term called the virtual mass of the bow. And you don't get all the energy out of the bow, but say you shot an arrow that weighed nothing, it wouldn't go infinitely fast.
Yes.
It would go very fast, but not infinitely fast. And that's because even though the arrow's got no mass, the bow effectively has some mass that's trying to accelerate, even if there's no arrow.
Yeah.
And they call that the virtual mass. And so that the amount of energy you get out of your bow is the ratio of your arrow mass to that bow's virtual mass.
Okay.
That ultimately gets back to how much does the string weigh in some respects.
Interesting. So what, saying the heavier the string, the more arrow weight?
The heavier the string, then the more energy the string keeps when the arrow leaves.
Yeah, wow.
That's why, for example, on compound bows, they're not putting much central serving.
No. So what about things like axle to axle and brace height and things like that? How do they affect the shot process on a compound bow and then be a long bow, or sorry, a traditional bow in general?
It's interesting. A lot of if you take the common compound bow lengths for my game target archery, field archery, typical compound bow is about 36 to 40 inches axle to axle.
Yes.
A bit longer than yours.
Correct. Yeah. 30 to 33 is probably pretty common, I think, or 28, I think, through to 33, depending on the size of the human.
That's an interesting question as to what length should you use. I've got a couple of compound bows. I've shot a lot of my best competition archery with 35-inch axle to axle.
Yeah.
I've also got a 37 axle to axle, but the longest one is 40. Which should you use? One of the things I think
half a human. Yeah. It's a bit hard to carry around the bush of half a human walking around with you.
Yeah, good. Even around field course, a bit heavy.
Yeah.
I see good reason for a short, light one. One of the reasons I think you go for a longer one target range is the string angle. That your string angle, your longer one might be up at 90 degrees. The shorter one, it'll be somewhat less than that.
Yeah.
And if you analyse some of the errors that you get, depend on that string angle. A bigger string angle is better in effect.
What errors are you talking about there?
For example, if you touch the string on your face, for example, say you push the string, your nose into the string.
Yeah.
And that will flex the string and lower your peep. If you lower your peep, then you're going to go low.
Interesting. So that pressing of the nose to the string, because depending on obviously how much they're pressing against or putting pressure against the string is going to affect that ability as well then. So it's going to depend on the person.
Yeah, if you push your nose into the string, so you bend the string, because the string of the compound bow full draw is quite light with the let-offs we have. And if your peep's lower, then of course your arrow goes low. And for our game, that's costly. And but if you take then the axle to axle of the bow, a longer axle to axle bow has a higher string tension at full draw.
Okay.
So it's less affected by a certain amount of nose pressure. Just an example.
Yeah, interesting.
It's an interesting area to look at.
The crazy thing about archery, you look at it before you get into archery versus after you get into it. And the amount of variables you don't realize are actually inside of the sport of archery or the sport of shooting a bow in general. It's crazy. The depths that you can go into, the rabbit holes you can follow.
Quite.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So
I'll just give you an interesting that that's not hunting, but more interesting. This is definitely target archery. My game, not hunting, is we've got a shooting line on the ground that we're supposed to shoot from. And say you're shooting the international competition for compound, it'll be 50 metres. And so where you put your feet, from point of view of the target range, what the rules say is your body should be above the shooting line. That's all it says.
Got you.
But does that mean you have your feet equally spaced, or does it have
your back foot touching or your front foot touching? Or yep.
An interesting one, if you do the maths of that and say you stand with 1 foot equally spaced. So if you stand 1 foot equally spaced and I stand one with my back foot up at the line, in international competition, I'll gain one place.
You'll gain one place?
Yeah.
Because of the lesser distance or what?
Yeah, because I'm closer.
Yeah, got you.
So there's lots of little tricky ways you can
game the sport,
get score higher.
Yeah.
Ones.
But there's loopholes and everything, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
So tell me, because you were the London Olympic coach. So
yes.
Tell me, was that traditional or was that compound?
That was all recurve.
All recurve.
Until So until now, all Olympic has been recurve. All Los Angeles will have compound.
Okay.
It was an interesting event. It was at Lord's Cricket Ground. It was a fabulous venue. It was interesting.
Yeah. What kind of dictates, obviously, what's the best way to say this? Let's talk about actually just best form that you were working on with your athletes.
For example, the man that I had was Taylor Worth. He's marvellously good archer, terrific form. His technique was good enough that he could win a medal.
Yeah.
At the vane, what you have is you have a ranking round at 70 metres, and you try and score the highest you can. Then you have knockout matches 1-on-1.
Yes. Build the tension.
Those matches are only a very small number of arrows. And so the probability of one archer or the other winning gets a bit close to 50-50.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit dicey. Taylor came ninth.
Okay.
But he could have got a medal.
So do you think that the sport of archery, in the sense of like the Olympic level, most of it comes down to, obviously, form is they're all going to have good form. So does most of it come down?
Mostly pretty good form.
Does it come down to then mindset and the mental capacity of the individual?
Yeah. It's a big dose of mindset.
So in that circumstance, are you doing a lot of like mental prep for him?
Yeah, we do that.
And what does that look like?
It's how they think, how they retain concentration on what they're doing rather than wandering off. For example, one of the things we tell them is, don't worry about the other guy, just shoot your arrows as good as you can. And if it's good enough, it's good enough. But if it wasn't, well, tough.
Yeah.
What you shouldn't do is get too enthralled as to what others are doing.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's very interesting. Even in the hunting world, what we find a lot of is that when someone gets in front of an animal, that's when their adrenaline dumps. They get all of these other things that they haven't factored in before. So practicing in the backyard is very different to going and taking a shot at an animal.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the people I've talked to, like Tom Clum Senior, for instance, who's all about mechanical setup and how you actually shoot. And then we've got Joel Turner, who talks a lot about the mindset and the talking process, having the conversation with yourself because thoughts are not thinking, and just that whole concept that plays into it, where is if you can talk yourself through the shot of, okay, I've drawn back and all right, now I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure. I'm pressuring, I'm going to shoot and pressuring, then the shot goes off. It's more of a surprise release.
It's very similar to what we do. What I would try to do would be to have, say, the archer a very well-known process that they're using for the shot. They'll not differ for archer to archer, but the process they are using, they should understand and they should be able to
concrete to them. Yeah.
So as the coach, for example, the pressure, you can say, okay, we just follow the process. And sometimes even with archers, you'll talk them through the process as they're shooting, just to try and keep them concentrating on the bit that matters and not thinking about results before they've got results.
So in the setup for when he's actually shooting, how close are you to him to be able to talk?
3 metres behind.
Okay, so you are able to just vocalize.
Now, interestingly, in London with 7,000 people around us, hellish noisy. It's ideal for over 3 metres.
Yeah.
It's loud.
Yeah, far out.
Most competitions, it's not so loud, but the standard process we would use as a coach is to just, what's the process? We go process rather than think about results.
Yeah.
We've got them.
Yeah. That translates heavily to hunting. I would think. You can't think about the end job until it's really done.
Standing there with the antler, everything, I got it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what does a lot of people over. A big part for me was just, rushing the end of the process. Essentially, I would get close to the ending and be like, oh, I got to get the shot away. But and that never helps anyone. So
no, process all the way.
Yeah. So
it's hard to do.
Oh, it is. It's very tough.
So it's easy. It's hard.
No, and it's something you have to practice relentlessly, put yourself in different situations. There's a lot of guys that even do exercise with their bow. So they'll put themselves where their heart rate's up and then they're taking a shot just to go through the process and make sure that they're not shooting arrows left and center and whatever else, or hopefully center, not anywhere else.
The other thing we try to do is, you get out and practice. People out there just shooting arrows, or are they practicing? Now,
is it deliberate practice or not?
Yeah, that's right. And some of these things we need to build in as deliberate practice rather than just volume.
Correct. Yeah, I strongly agree with that. And essentially what we're talking about there is the difference between having the conversations, going through the exact shot process every time. Where are my feet stance? Okay, where am I drawing to? Where am I anchoring? What am I saying whilst I'm releasing the shot? Is it the same every single time, or is it differing? And if it's differing, then we probably need to change those things.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah, that's very interesting. In regards to arrows, and obviously we're jumping over the place a little bit here, but is there things that we didn't talk about that we probably should have?
I think you captured it.
Is there a misconception that you have found, like something that most archers think that isn't actually true, or anything like that kind of comes
Well,
into
so
it?
from point of view of our game, there was a misconception at one stage that faster arrow drifts less. That's not right. You know, you go to a lighter arrow so that it gets there faster and therefore it's got less time to drift.
Yeah.
No, it drifts more. Hopefully we've got away from that. So, yeah, just our game, I guess it translates as small diameter, heavy. It's the thing we've got people to think of.
I do find that very interesting what you were just saying about speed, because obviously something that every new bow is trying to achieve with the compound in particular, they're trying to be the fastest. They're trying to, yeah, exactly. That ever ending, I guess it's part of the marketing, maybe.
Yeah, it is.
That they need to have a faster bow because if they're the fastest, maybe they're the best in many people's eyes. And that's when people are going to go buy them.
User perception.
Yes.
Although one of the things that comes with that is that the bows get more aggressive. Coming into the wall, they're more abrupt. And so if you don't hold onto the wall as hard, you might get ripped off the wall a bit easier.
That's interesting. So in regards to if you had a floating wall, like I don't use the dead stop on mine, what would be the difference then if you're at the floating wall, but you're anchored in your position and then you're releasing the shot? What effect is that going to have?
Well, it's interesting. If I take one of my older bows, it has got quite a valley and you shoot around the valley. If you relax a bit, you're just still in the valley. If I take one and you relax, you're off. Yeah. The older one's much more pleasant to shoot.
That's interesting. I would have thought with the higher let-off percentages that you can have that it would have been more forgiving.
Yeah.
Not the case.
But also the higher let-off, you remember, the more let-off, the lower the string.
The lower strings. Yeah, got you.
Some of those other errors will bite you more.
So in regards to target archery, you guys are trying to go for a tighter string in the back wall, so you've got less room for error based on your own mechanics.
Correct.
So let's position it like this. If you were to start hunting, James, what would you look for in a bow and what would you look for in your arrow setup?
I would be going again, you've got to carry the thing through the field.
Yep.
I know how hard a bow is to carry through a field course. So I'd be going to a reasonably light, probably I'd go.
A carbon setup or not?
Sorry,
To a carbon?
I've got a white carbon matrix at 35 inches.
Yep.
It's a lovely little thing. I'd be going something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And probably from point of view of your game, that's seen as dramatically too long.
I wouldn't say dramatically too long. How tall are you?
Oh, I'm about 180.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But no, that's probably not, it's definitely on the longer side, but I wouldn't say it's dramatically too long. But yeah.
I know from the field course, the carbon 35 inches, much easier to carry around the field course than the other one. So I'd be looking for something like that. I'd be looking for arrow-wise, what I'd be doing, I'd be going skinny, heavy. I'd probably go 3 Fletchers, three long Fletchers.
Yep. They're very interesting. So something we didn't talk to before, obviously we were talking about brace height, but not brace height, axle to axle, but we weren't taking into consideration draw length at that point in time. Yeah. So obviously the higher axle to axle you go with the short draw length, it's going to change the angles.
Yes, it does.
Pretty drastically.
My draw length is 29 inches. From point of view, 37 inch axle shoots. It's got a big string angle. It's enough. I wouldn't go to a 40.
Yep.
I quite like shooting a 35 because the string angle's still okay, and I like the feel of the bow. I have tried shooting in our game a 33, didn't like it at all for target. So I guess you're thinking from your game, is it how do you get carrying through the bush?
Exactly. What didn't you like about the 33 versus the 35?
I didn't like the feel of the shot, and the peep was too far away from where I. You think we're going very tiny peeps, so we're going the smallest peep side we can get for our game.
What does that do? Narrows the focus, essentially. Yeah.
It takes away minimises the aiming error.
And then with the field, is it field archery that you guys use the multiple pin sights?
We generally don't use multiple pin sights.
It's always just single sight and you just maneuver it based on your roller, your slider. Yeah.
We've got time to do that.
It's very interesting because a lot of people are actually taking up that in the bow hunting world. And many people are saying it's just purely because it gives them too much to focus on if there's multiple pins there.
So of course, you got the trick. You got to remember to move the thing.
Exactly right. And yeah, I've definitely done that. I've moved my sight on the slider and then shoot over the top of a target or something. Yeah. That's always fun.
That's right.
It's only happened to me once in a hunting situation, and you kick yourself, that's for sure. You work so hard to get an animal in front of you.
and use the wrong darn sight setting, you think, don't bother.
Yeah, definitely. What about the future of arrows, the future of archery in general? Is there anything that kind of excites you about what's coming? Do you have much communication with bow technicians and the things that they're constantly trying to work on?
I've interacted a great deal with Eastern in relation to arrow design. They were very helpful to me when I was studying arrows.
I mean, they sent you a lot of arrows to practice with or to play with?
They did, yes.
Yeah.
They were very helpful, and I've spoken to their engineers a lot. I know their engineers pretty well.
Yeah.
I've also analysed how do you make the very good arrow? Are there things that they could do now that would make them even better? For example, I've said in our game, small diameter matters. They go smaller. I don't think they could.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting, right? To be able to maintain the weight plus have it thin.
You can't fit a point on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And if you take the material they're made of, much smaller, you can't get them stiff enough.
Have you seen the recent testings that they've just put out? There was a guy, I think it was James, someone. He just did another James. I'm pretty sure he just did testing over in someone Yates, actually, but he just did it over in America. He's done massive testing with Easterns with a lot of different testings. Have you seen any of that data that's come out?
One of the ones I've just been looking at is their new 3.2 millimeter parallel pro. I think that looked marvelously good.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't had one in my hand yet, but
no.
Well, I've of course done the maths to analyse it, and I think it looks really good.
Yeah.
Well, certainly from our game, it looks really good.
Yeah. I'd be highly interested in the broadhead and its effects on a thin versus a wider diameter in regards to the changes that's going to take. Because obviously a field point, it's only got at certain sizes, right? Like obviously there is wider ones that you can get to some degree, but that's not necessarily what you're probably going to be testing with. Most of the time it's going to be pretty sleek and thin and of the same, not the same size, but exactly.
The other thing that really stands out to me is if you get an arrow that's got an aluminium core, but most of the arrows we're dealing with carbon fiber, of course.
Yes.
But the aluminium core, I think, is important and it adds mass.
But to play devil's advocate there, what if you've already got a reasonably heavy arrow? So GPI is up. It's not something you're going to necessarily play with.
It's okay. Yeah. It's going to matter.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Your game is going to be pretty heavy anyway.
Yeah.
And so the distances aren't so dramatic. But yeah, for our game, that aluminium core is really advantageous.
Yeah. What do you use to actually do the measurements of kinetic energy at the target?
That's good fun. I've got a shooting machine.
Hooper shooter, yeah.
And I've also got Eastern kindly provided me with an arrow speed measuring device. I don't think they sell it anymore, but I've used it a lot.
Yeah, I think Garmin do one now.
Yeah, I've shot arrows through the speed measurer out to 100 meters.
Yeah.
And then I can measure the downrange velocity and compare that with the calculated downrange velocity from the drag calculations.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
That will let me know for example, the kinetic energy.
Yeah. So, sorry, velocity and kinetic energy overlap how?
Kinetic energy is half the mass times the velocity squared. So
okay.
Add mass and measure the velocity and other kinetic energy.
Yeah, okay.
So I've measured that for lots of arrows out to very long distances. And I had to do that because am I going to be confident in my calculations of drag?
Yes. Yeah, interesting. So essentially wrapping up based on what you've said, if you're shooting further, it is more important to probably go with a thinner diameter and a heavy, whilst adding heaviness to it.
Yes.
Versus absolutely. If you're going for would you say 40 meters, under 40 meter shots, that a thicker arrow with a heavier arrow set, essentially in the hunting circumstances, what I'm trying to get to, that would also play into being favorable.
Heavy will get you more energy from the bow, so it'll be favorable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's cool to put the science all together and bring it all into one. I found this very interesting. And what is still unclear in my head is there a perfect arrow weight, yes or no, for hunting? I don't know. I think maybe my effect of trying to just find something that works for you and keeping with that, like that's going to be the best play for most people.
Yeah, that's probably true. One of the things I always think, my shooting buddy and I have comment to us frequently that if we don't occasionally try something different, their scores aren't going to change.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. I guess it just comes down to maybe if you're hunting more often and you're getting lots of opportunities, it is worthwhile tinkering and playing around with and seeing what your ability is. Yeah.
The other thing, one approach I take is I always listen to what people say, listen to ideas that people might have, because they might have something I haven't thought of. It might be something important.
Definitely.
I don't necessarily believe it until I've had a look at the physics.
Yes. Yeah. And so meaning you have to go and do all of the testing with the measuring of the...
If I hear something that sounds potentially interesting, I would go then try to analyze it.
So what
the maths in,
makes something interesting to you then?
Does it make sense? And then should we then have a poke at it?
Yeah. So is there stuff that you're constantly hearing at the moment, or is there tests you've done recently that have been interesting?
Always hearing lots of things.
Yeah.
And so I always think, I always listen. I try not to dismiss something straight off because I missed some clever thing that someone thought of that I didn't. But then I will always say, what's the physics? Because that tells me whether it's got a chance or not. And if I can understand the physics, then I have a chance of optimizing it.
Okay, here's one for you. Recently, one of the things that I did change about my arrow was the actual length. So I've got a 30-inch draw, but I cut my arrows down to 29 and a quarter inch, because what it did was put it as close to my broadhead, as close to my riser at the shot. So it is giving me a little less in weight, but essentially a little more speed. And for me, it just made a bit of sense just to try testing and seeing if it made much of a difference. I actually went from a 250 spine to a 300 spine and cut it back to the 29 and a quarter inch. So it's probably saved me 50 grains in total. Yeah. But does that arrow length, how far your arrow tip is hanging over from the riser, does that have much of an effect on your accuracy or on anything in general?
I think the way the arrow behaves would be very similar. What I'd normally recommend for target archers, don't have too much out the front because it's slightly more wind drift.
Okay.
I would say it's not critical.
No, but enough to have somewhat of an effect if you want every 1% advantage.
Oh yeah, you got 1%, you take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And then knock tuning. When you're actually tuning your arrows, are you going through and knock tuning them?
No, because I'm using the top-notch best arrows and they're very uniform.
Got you. So you're saying that there is no difference between when you turn the arrow, the knock 90 degrees. There shouldn't be.
No. I have, of course, looked at it, but it's not, for the arrows I use, it's not important.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. Okay, cool. I think we've covered a lot here. Is there anything that you think we should have talked about that we didn't, James?
I think it's been good fun, Matty.
Amazing. I really appreciate it. I think the crossover is very interesting. I think there's probably more to the conversation that needs to happen in regards to what we were saying about the penetration ability, right? I think that still sticks out in my mind. So very interesting at the same time. Like, it is very cool to see how a love for archery can pull you into doing what you've done in a lifetime in a doctorate, and I'm sure you had some pretty crazy and fun adventures because of archery.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, James. I really appreciate you.
Pleasure, Matty.